What if the person you ignored, mocked and dismissed every single day was actually your lifeline? What if behind those quiet eyes and trembling hands lived a secret so powerful it could save your very existence? The morning sun filters through the grimy windows of Lincoln High School, casting long shadows across the crowded hallway. Students rush past lockers, their laughter echoing off the walls like broken glass. But in the corner, pressed against the cold metal of locker 247, stands 17-year-old Marcus Chen. His oversized hoodie swallows his thin frame, and his eyes remain fixed on the worn pages of a leather-bound notebook clutched against his chest. Marcus moves through the world like a ghost, present but unseen, breathing but unnoticed. His footsteps make no sound as he navigates the maze of teenage cruelty that has become his daily prison. 3 years of high school, and he remains invisible to everyone except those who find pleasure in his pain. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The first blow comes during second period. Tyler Morrison, captain of the wrestling team, accidentally shoulders Marcus into the water fountain. The notebook flies from his hands, its pages scattering like fallen leaves. As Marcus scrambles to collect his precious words, Tyler's laughter booms through the corridor. But what Tyler doesn't notice, what none of them ever notice, is the way Marcus's fingers move across those pages, tracing patterns that look almost mathematical. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, share your experience in the comments. It might touch someone's heart today. Now take a deep breath and prepare yourself for a journey that might change the way you see the world. Marcus has learned to read the language of cruelty with scientific precision. He knows that Jessica Williams will trip him exactly 43 seconds after entering the cafeteria. He predicts that David Park will steal his lunch money every Tuesday and Thursday, but never on Fridays, because David has detention. Marcus documents everything in his notebook, not out of self-pity, but with the methodical precision of a researcher studying a complex ecosystem. The other students see weakness in his silence. They interpret his careful observations as cowardice, his meticulous notes as the ravings of a disturbed loner. But Marcus isn't broken. He's calculating. Every insult, every shove, every moment of humiliation gets recorded with timestamps, patterns, and behavioral analysis that would impress a FBI profiler. During lunch, he sits alone at the corner table, his fingers dancing across his notebook while his tormentors hold court just 20 feet away. Tyler regales his audience with stories of this morning's encounter, embellishing details that never happened. Jessica adds her own cruel commentary, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. They're so absorbed in their performance that they don't notice Marcus looking up from his writing, studying them with the intensity of a scientist observing specimens under a microscope. What they also don't notice is the small device hidden beneath his hoodie, its tiny light blinking steadily as it records every word, every laugh, every casual admission of cruelty. Marcus isn't just surviving, he's gathering evidence. But for what? That afternoon, as Marcus walks home through the quiet suburban streets, his phone buzzes with a notification that makes his heart skip. The message is brief, but electrifying. Target confirmed. Operation begins tomorrow. AC. His fingers tremble slightly as he types his response. Understood. All data ready for transmission. The quiet kid everyone ignores has been hiding in plain sight, but his secret runs deeper than anyone could imagine. Wednesday arrives with an unusual energy crackling through Lincoln High's corridors. Marcus notices it immediately. The subtle shift in body language, the hushed conversations that stop when teachers pass by, the way certain students keep checking their phones with nervous excitement. But his tormentors remain obliviously focused on their daily routine of psychological warfare. During first period chemistry, Tyler orchestrates his most elaborate humiliation yet. As Marcus reaches for a beaker, Tyler creates a chain reaction that sends the entire experiment crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass punctuates the classroom as Mrs. Henderson scolds Marcus for his clumsiness. 28 pairs of eyes focus on Marcus as he kneels to clean up the mess, his cheeks burning with manufactured shame. But as Marcus picks up the broken pieces, his eyes meet those of Amanda Clark, the student council president sitting in the front row. She's not laughing like the others. Instead, she's watching him with an expression he's never seen before: recognition. She touches her phone briefly, and Marcus's device vibrates twice, the signal he's been waiting 3 months to receive. The morning crawls by with agonizing precision. Each class brings fresh torment from Tyler's crew, but Marcus endures it all with newfound purpose. During third period English, when David Park tears a page from his notebook and passes it around for others to mock, Marcus doesn't react. He simply pulls out his phone and sends a single text: "Package ready for delivery. Authorization code 7743. By lunch, the atmosphere has shifted dramatically, though most students remain unaware. Marcus sits at his usual corner table, but today his notebook remains closed. Instead, he watches the cafeteria's main table where Tyler holds court, completely unaware that his kingdom is about to crumble. At exactly 12:47 p.m., Principal Morrison's voice crackles over the intercom. "Tyler Morrison, Jessica Williams, and David Park, please report to the main office immediately." The cafeteria falls silent. Tyler's face drains of color, but he maintains his bravado as he swaggers toward the exit. Jessica and David exchange nervous glances before following. Marcus remains seated, his expression unchanged. But for the first time in 3 years, he allows himself the smallest smile. The quiet kid everyone dismissed as powerless has just set in motion events that will reshape everything they thought they knew about justice, technology, and the price of cruelty. What Tyler and his crew are about to discover will shatter their understanding of who Marcus really is, and why targeting him was the biggest mistake of their lives. The main office has transformed into something resembling a federal investigation center. Principal Morrison sits behind his desk, but he's not alone. Special Agent Rebecca Hayes of the FBI's Cybercrimes Division occupies the chair beside him, her laptop displaying evidence that makes the blood drain from Tyler's face. Detective Maria Santos from the local police department stands near the window, her expression grave. "Gentlemen, Ms. Williams," Agent Hayes begins, her voice carrying the weight of authority that comes with federal credentials. "We need to discuss your online activities over the past 6 months." She clicks through a presentation that displays screenshots, chat logs, and video evidence that Tyler thought he'd deleted long ago. Tyler's swagger evaporates as he recognizes his own words reflected back at him. Death threats posted on anonymous forums, detailed plans for school violence that he insisted were just jokes, and communications with known extremist groups that painted him not as a harmless bully, but as a potential domestic terrorist. David and Jessica realize their own innocent participation in Tyler's online echo chamber has been meticulously documented. "How did you—" Jessica stammers, but Agent Hayes raises her hand. "We've had an informant working inside your social circle for months," she explains. "Someone who's been documenting every threat, every plan, every casual mention of violence with the precision of a trained intelligence officer." She pauses for effect. "Someone you never suspected because you were too busy tormenting him to notice his real capabilities." The door opens and Marcus enters with a confidence none of them have ever seen before. Gone is the hunched posture and downcast eyes. He walks with the measured stride of someone who has just completed a successful mission. Amanda Clark follows behind him, no longer hiding her role in the operation. Tyler's world tilts on its axis. You're nobody." Marcus finally speaks, and his voice carries none of the trembling weakness they're accustomed to hearing. "My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm a Level 7 analyst trainee with the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Prevention Program. For the past 18 months, I've been conducting deep cover surveillance of potential threats in suburban high schools. He gestures to his notebook. Every interaction you've had with me has been recorded, analyzed, and transmitted to federal databases. The truth hits like a physical blow. The quiet kid they tortured wasn't weak. He was working. Every cruel word, every threat, every moment of aggression has been building a federal case against them. Marcus wasn't suffering in silence. He was gathering evidence that could save lives. The online forums you frequent, Tyler, have been linked to 17 school shooting incidents across the country. Detective Santos adds, "Your communications suggest you were in the planning stages of an attack on Lincoln High. Thanks to Marcus's intelligence gathering, we've prevented what could have been a tragedy." Amanda steps forward, revealing her own federal credentials. "I'm Agent Clark, Marcus's handler and coordinator. What you perceived as high school social hierarchy was actually a sophisticated intelligence operation designed to identify and neutralize domestic terror threats before they materialize." The room spins around Tyler as he realizes the magnitude of his situation. His bullying wasn't just cruel, it was evidence of a darker pattern that federal agents had been tracking for months. The quiet kid he tormented daily had been his lifeline all along, the only thing standing between his angry fantasies and a path that would have destroyed multiple lives. But this revelation is only the beginning. The true scope of Marcus's mission and the lives he's actually saved is about to become clear. Agent Hayes opens another file, this one containing surveillance footage from 12 different high schools across 3 states. Operation Silent Guardian isn't just about Lincoln High, she explains, her words hitting the room like thunderbolts. Marcus is one of 47 operatives we've placed in schools nationwide, all working to identify potential threats before they escalate. The footage shows Marcus at various school events over the past year, not as the isolated victim everyone believed him to be, but as a trained observer documenting behavioral patterns and identifying students who matched federal threat assessment profiles. His apparent loneliness was actually strategic positioning that allowed him to monitor multiple targets without detection. Tyler watches in stunned silence as Agent Hayes reveals the true scope of his online activities. His private chat groups included undercover federal operatives who had been monitoring his increasingly violent rhetoric. His plans to make them pay and show them who's really in control weren't dismissed as teenage angst. They were treated as genuine threats requiring federal intervention. Marcus didn't just prevent one potential tragedy, Detective Santos continues. His intelligence led to interventions at 4 other schools where students were in advanced stages of planning attacks. 17 lives saved in Missouri, 32 in Ohio, and 61 in Oregon. She pauses to let the numbers sink in. Over 100 innocent people are alive today because the boy you tormented every day was actually protecting them. David Park breaks down completely as the implications crash over him. His role in encouraging Tyler's increasingly violent fantasies, his participation in online forums that glorified school violence, his casual dismissal of Marcus's humanity, all of it had been documented and analyzed by federal algorithms designed to predict and prevent domestic terrorism. Jessica Williams realizes her own complicity runs deeper than she imagined. Her social media posts mocking Marcus, her videos recording his humiliation, her encouragement of Tyler's aggressive behavior, they weren't just cruel teenage moments, but evidence of a social ecosystem that enables and amplifies dangerous individuals. Marcus watches their realizations unfold with the detached professionalism of someone who has completed a successful mission. But as Agent Hayes continues revealing the operation's scope, even Marcus seems surprised by certain details. His handler's voice takes on a different tone as she addresses him directly. "Marcus, there's something else you need to know about your assignment here." Amanda's expression grows serious. "You weren't just gathering intelligence on Tyler and his group. You were also being evaluated for recruitment into our most classified program, one that requires operatives who can maintain cover under extreme psychological pressure while never losing sight of their humanitarian mission. The revelation that Marcus himself was being tested, that his 3 years of apparent suffering were actually an extended job interview for the FBI's most elite domestic protection unit, adds another layer to an already complex truth. Tyler stares at Marcus with a mixture of awe and horror. "You mean all this time when we were—" Marcus finally shows emotion, but it's not the anger or resentment Tyler expects. Instead, his eyes reflect something closer to sadness. "When you were hurting me, I was thinking about the students you might hurt tomorrow. Every cruel word you spoke helped our behavioral analysts better understand how violence escalates. Every threat you made online brought us closer to preventing real tragedy." The quiet kid they dismissed as powerless had been carrying the weight of potential futures on his shoulders, enduring daily torment, not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to suffer for the sake of strangers he'd never meet. But the most shocking revelation is yet to come. Agent Hayes closes her laptop and turns to face Tyler directly. Her next words will reshape everything he thought he understood about justice, consequence, and second chances. "Tyler, despite the severity of your online activities and the genuine threat you posed, the Department of Justice is prepared to offer you an alternative to federal prosecution." The words hang in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Tyler's attorney, who arrived 20 minutes ago and has been frantically taking notes, looks up with barely concealed hope. "Marcus recommended you for our intervention program," Agent Hayes continues. "According to his psychological assessment, your aggressive behavior stems from untreated trauma and social isolation rather than genuine ideological extremism. He believes you can be redirected rather than simply punished." Tyler's world turns upside down once again. The boy he tormented daily, the victim of his cruelest moments, had been advocating for his salvation rather than his destruction. While Tyler was plotting imaginary revenge against a school that barely noticed his existence, Marcus was building a case not just for Tyler's arrest, but for his rehabilitation. "Marcus spent considerable time analyzing your behavioral patterns," Detective Santos adds. "He identified 17 distinct triggers for your aggressive episodes, documented your family situation, and noted that your violence escalated during periods when your father was deployed overseas. His recommendation emphasized intervention over incarceration." Marcus steps forward, and for the first time in 3 years, he addresses Tyler as an equal rather than a target. "I know what it's like to feel powerless," he says quietly. "The difference is, I chose to use that feeling to protect others. You chose to hurt them. But choice means you can choose differently." The intervention program Agent Hayes describes sounds nothing like the punishment Tyler expected. Instead of juvenile detention or federal charges, he'll spend the next 2 years in a residential program that combines psychological counseling, community service, and education about the real-world consequences of online extremism. He'll work directly with survivors of school violence, helping them heal while learning to channel his own anger into protective rather than destructive actions. David and Jessica face similar alternatives: intensive counseling, community service, and participation in anti-bullying education programs. Their futures remain intact, but forever changed by the understanding that their actions had consequences extending far beyond their teenage social circle. But perhaps the most profound transformation belongs to Marcus himself. Agent Hayes reveals that his performance at Lincoln High has earned him early acceptance into the FBI Academy's specialized program for domestic threat prevention. At 17, he's already demonstrated skills that most agents spend years developing. The question now, Agent Hayes says, is whether Marcus wants to continue this work, knowing that it means more assignments like this one, more time spent as a target, gathering intelligence that saves lives but requires him to endure genuine suffering for the greater good. Marcus looks around the room at the faces of those who tormented him, those who betrayed him, and those who supported him. His decision will determine not just his own future, but the fate of countless potential victims in schools across the country. The quiet kid everyone ignored is about to make a choice that will echo through lives he'll never know. Marcus's response surprises everyone in the room, including Agent Hayes. "I'll continue the work," he says quietly, "but I want Tyler to help me." The suggestion seems impossible, even absurd. How could the former bully become an ally in preventing the very behavior he embodied? But Marcus continues with the methodical logic that has defined his entire mission. Tyler understands the mindset of potential threats better than any psychological profile could capture, Marcus explains. He knows how online communities radicalize isolated students, how anger transforms into violence, and how to identify others who are following the same path he was on. We need that insight. Agent Hayes raises an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we recruit your former tormentor as an asset?" "I'm suggesting we give him the chance to save lives instead of taking them." Marcus turns to Tyler, who sits in stunned silence. "You wanted power, Tyler. Real power isn't making people afraid of you. It's making them safe despite their fear." The proposal that emerges over the next hour sounds like something from a spy novel. Tyler would complete his intervention program while training as a junior analyst, learning to identify and redirect other students who show signs of escalating toward violence. His intimate knowledge of online extremist communities, combined with proper guidance, could help prevent tragedies across multiple school districts. Jessica and David would join the effort in different capacities, Jessica using her social media influence to counteract bullying culture, and David working with counselors to identify students who need support before they become either victims or perpetrators. "You're asking us to become the people we should have been all along," Jessica says, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm asking you to use your understanding of cruelty to prevent it," Marcus corrects. "Every student you tormented taught you something about vulnerability. Now you can use that knowledge to protect vulnerable students instead of exploiting them." Agent Hayes looks skeptical. "This is highly irregular. Former subjects don't typically become assets in ongoing operations." "Nothing about this case has been typical," Detective Santos points out. If Marcus can endure 3 years of systematic abuse while maintaining his mission focus and still advocate for his abusers' rehabilitation, maybe we should trust his judgment about their potential for transformation. Amanda Clark, who has remained silent during most of the exchange, finally speaks. "There is precedent for this kind of recruitment," she admits. "Several of our most effective operatives are former subjects who were successfully redirected. They bring insights that traditional training cannot provide." Tyler finds his voice at last. "You really think I could, after everything I've done, you think I could actually help people?" Marcus meets his gaze directly. "I think you understand pain better than most people ever will. The question is whether you want to cause it or heal it." The transformation happening in that small office represents something unprecedented in federal law enforcement. The possibility that those who cause harm might become those who prevent it, that understanding cruelty could be the key to stopping it. But implementing this unprecedented alliance will require everyone involved to confront truths about themselves that go deeper than any investigation could reach. 6 months later, Lincoln High School has become unrecognizable. The hallways that once echoed with cruel laughter now hum with purposeful energy. Students move differently, speak differently, and most importantly, treat each other differently. The change isn't mandated by new rules or policies. It's organic, growing from the inside out like a healing wound. Tyler Morrison walks these same corridors, but his presence creates waves of protection rather than fear. Students who once cowered in his wake now approach him with problems, knowing he understands the darkness that can consume someone who feels powerless. His transition from predator to protector hasn't been easy. Months of intensive therapy revealed childhood trauma that explained but didn't excuse his behavior. More importantly, it gave him tools to help others avoid the path he nearly took. There's a sophomore in Mr. Garcia's physics class, Tyler tells Marcus during their weekly briefing. Kevin Zhang. He's been posting some concerning content online, and his behavior matches my old patterns almost exactly. Tyler's ability to recognize the warning signs in other students has proven invaluable. In 6 months, he's identified 14 potential threats and helped redirect them towards support rather than violence. Marcus, now a senior and officially recognized as a student liaison for the FBI's prevention program, reviews Tyler's report with professional attention. His cover has been partially blown, but rather than compromising his mission, the revelation has enhanced it. Students who once feared him now trust him with their darkest thoughts, knowing he understands both pain and the possibility of transformation. Jessica Williams has become an unexpected force for social change. Her popular YouTube channel, which once featured cruel pranks and mockery, now showcases stories of redemption and second chances. Her most powerful video, a raw, unfiltered confession about her role in Tyler's near radicalization and her friendship with Marcus, has been viewed over 2 million times and inspired similar honesty from influencers across social media. David Park's transformation might be the most profound of all. Once Tyler's most eager follower, he now works with the school's counseling department to identify students who are being recruited by online extremist groups. His understanding of how peer pressure and social isolation create vulnerability has helped counselors develop more effective intervention strategies. But the ripple effects extend far beyond Lincoln High. The success of the Tyler Morrison rehabilitation experiment has inspired similar programs in 43 states. Former bullies, redirected extremists, and reformed aggressors are being trained to recognize and prevent the very behaviors they once embodied. Agent Hayes reviews monthly reports from schools across the country, documenting a measurable decrease in both bullying incidents and extremist recruitment. It's almost too good to be true, she tells Amanda during their quarterly review. Students are policing themselves, supporting each other, and reporting threats before they escalate. It's as if peer culture itself is becoming an immune system against violence. The data supports her observation. School counselors report that students are more likely to seek help for mental health issues, more willing to report concerning behavior in peers, and more engaged in creating positive social environments. The presence of reformed former aggressors seems to give other students permission to change, to admit mistakes, and to choose growth over continued destructive patterns. Marcus sits in his favorite corner of the cafeteria, no longer alone, but by choice. Students regularly join him, some seeking advice, others simply enjoying the company of someone who listens without judgment. His notebook still travels with him, but now it contains stories of prevention rather than documentation of cruelty. Tyler approaches the table carrying 2 lunch trays. It's a sight that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. The former bully bringing food to the boy he once tormented. Their relationship has evolved into something unique, not quite friendship, but deeper than mere cooperation. They share an understanding of human nature's capacity for both darkness and redemption that few people their age could comprehend. Kevin Zhang responded well to our intervention, Tyler reports as he sits down. He's agreed to counseling and wants to help with our freshman orientation program next year. He pauses, studying Marcus's expression. Do you ever wonder if we're actually making a difference, or if we're just delaying the inevitable? Marcus closes his notebook and considers the question seriously. Every day I prevent one act of cruelty, I create space for one act of kindness. Maybe that kindness inspires another, and another, until the balance shifts. I can't save everyone, but I can save someone. and that someone might save someone else. Their conversation is interrupted by a commotion near the cafeteria entrance. A new student, clearly nervous, clearly struggling with the social navigation that makes high school treacherous for so many, stands uncertain in the doorway. Around him, other students continue their conversations, unaware of his hesitation. Tyler and Marcus exchange a knowing look. They recognize the signs, the defensive posture, the carefully controlled expression, the way he scans the room looking for threats rather than opportunities. Without discussion, they both stand and walk toward the new student. "Hey," Tyler says, his voice carrying none of the menace it once held. "I'm Tyler, and this is Marcus. Want to sit with us?" The new student looks between them uncertainly. I usually eat alone." "So did we," Marcus replies gently. "But we learned that alone doesn't have to mean lonely." As they guide the new student toward their table, neither Tyler nor Marcus realizes that Agent Hayes is watching from the hallway, documenting this moment for a federal report on successful intervention strategies. What she witnesses, the transformation of predators into protectors, victims into advocates, and isolation into connection, represents a fundamental shift in how society might address the root causes of violence. The quiet kid who absorbed years of cruelty has become a catalyst for systemic change. But his greatest achievement isn't the lives he's saved or the threats he's neutralized. It's the proof that people can choose to become better than their worst moments. 2 years after the revelation that shattered Lincoln High's social hierarchy, Marcus receives a letter that changes everything he thought he understood about his mission. The envelope arrives on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Agent Hayes herself, rather than through normal mail channels. The return address shows only a federal facility designation, but Marcus recognizes the handwriting immediately. Inside, Tyler's words reveal a truth that even Marcus's analytical mind hadn't suspected. "Marcus, I need to tell you something that will probably make you hate me more than you already do. The FBI didn't find me because of my online activities. They found me because my father reported me." The letter continues with devastating honesty. Tyler's father, a career military officer, had discovered his son's increasingly violent online presence and contacted federal authorities himself. Major Morrison had provided the FBI with complete access to Tyler's devices, his behavioral patterns, and his psychological profile. The federal investigation hadn't been triggered by Marcus's intelligence gathering. It had been running parallel to it, with Tyler's own family facilitating his potential arrest. "The worst part," Tyler writes, "is that my father made them promise to tell me after I completed the program. He wanted me to understand that accountability sometimes comes from the people who love us most, even when that love feels like betrayal." Marcus stares at the letter, his analytical mind racing through the implications. Everything he believed about his mission at Lincoln High, every moment of suffering he endured believing it served a greater purpose, had been operating alongside a separate investigation he never knew existed. Tyler's transformation wasn't solely the result of Marcus's intelligence work, it was the culmination of a father's desperate attempt to save his son from himself. Agent Hayes watches Marcus process this information, her expression unreadable. "Does it change anything?" she asks quietly. The question hangs in the air like incense, heavy with meaning. Does it matter that Marcus's suffering wasn't the primary catalyst for preventing Tyler's potential violence? Does it diminish his sacrifice to know that other forces were already in motion? Does it make his choice to advocate for Tyler's rehabilitation less meaningful? Marcus thinks about the dozen other students Tyler has helped redirect over the past 2 years. He considers Jessica's transformation from cruel influencer to advocate for authentic connection. He remembers David's work identifying vulnerable students before they become radicalized. He reflects on the hundreds of lives that have been touched by their collective transformation. "It changes everything and nothing," Marcus finally answers. My purpose wasn't just to stop Tyler, it was to prove that people can choose to become better. Whether Tyler's father or my intelligence work deserves credit for preventing tragedy doesn't matter. What matters is that Tyler chose transformation when given the opportunity. Agent Hayes nods slowly. There's something else you should know. Tyler's father specifically requested that his son be paired with you for the rehabilitation program. He'd been monitoring your psychological profile through official channels and believed Tyler needed to understand the perspective of someone who chose strength over violence despite systematic abuse. The revelation adds another layer to an already complex truth. Marcus hadn't just been gathering intelligence on a potential threat. He'd been unknowingly participating in an intervention designed by a father who recognized his son's dangerous trajectory and sought to provide him with a different kind of role model. Tyler's letter concludes with words that will stay with Marcus forever. I used to think strength meant making others afraid of you. You taught me that real strength means making others feel safe with you. My father saved me from becoming a monster, but you saved me from staying one. Marcus folds the letter carefully and looks up at Agent Hayes. What happens now? Now you decide if you want to continue this work, knowing that intelligence gathering is only part of the mission. The real work, the work of proving that people can change, that's something no federal program can mandate. It has to come from individuals who choose compassion over revenge, growth over stagnation. Marcus thinks about the new student who joined their lunch table just yesterday, another isolated teenager displaying warning signs that could lead to tragedy or transformation. He considers the ripple effects that continue spreading through schools across the country as former aggressors become advocates for peace. His answer comes without hesitation. I want to continue. Not because I'm gathering intelligence, but because I'm helping people write better stories about themselves. The quiet kid who absorbed cruelty and transformed it into compassion has discovered that his true mission was never about preventing one tragedy. It was about proving that transformation is always possible, even in the darkest circumstances. 5 years after Marcus first walked into Lincoln High School as an undercover operative, he stands at the podium of the National Conference on School Safety, addressing an audience of educators, law enforcement officials, and policymakers from across the country. The teenager who once absorbed daily cruelty in silence now speaks with the authority of someone who has witnessed humanity's capacity for both destruction and redemption. The greatest threat to school safety isn't the potential shooter, Marcus tells the assembled crowd. It's the culture that creates potential shooters. Change the culture, and you prevent the tragedy before it begins. In the audience, Tyler Morrison takes notes with the dedication of a graduate student, which he technically is, enrolled in a joint program between the FBI Academy and Georgetown University, studying behavioral psychology and threat assessment. His transformation from potential domestic terrorist to federal consultant represents one of the program's most documented success stories. But he knows his real education came from watching Marcus choose compassion over revenge day after day. Jessica Williams streams the conference live to her 3.2 million social media followers, a platform now dedicated to showcasing stories of personal transformation and social justice. Her documentary series, Second Chances, has been credited with inspiring similar rehabilitation programs in 12 countries, proving that authentic change resonates across cultural boundaries. David Park, now a licensed counselor specializing in adolescent intervention, works directly with schools to identify and support at-risk students before they require federal attention. His understanding of peer pressure dynamics, gained through years of following rather than leading, has helped him develop programs that give other followers permission to choose different leaders. Agent Hayes, promoted to director of the Domestic Threat Prevention Division, cites the Lincoln High intervention as the template for a new approach to national security, one that prioritizes transformation over punishment and community healing over individual incarceration. The program has expanded to 847 schools across all 50 states, with former subjects serving as mentors and advocates for current at-risk students. But perhaps the most significant legacy isn't captured in federal reports or academic studies. It lives in the thousands of small moments happening daily in schools across America. A student choosing to sit with someone eating alone, a former bully intervening when they witness harassment, a victim choosing to help their former tormentor through a difficult moment. Marcus concludes his address with words that have become the unofficial motto of the program. We can't always choose what happens to us, but we can always choose what we become because of it. Every act of cruelty creates an opportunity for an even greater act of kindness. Every moment of pain can become a source of healing. Every person who has been broken can help others become whole. After the conference, Marcus, Tyler, Jessica, and David meet for their annual reunion dinner, a tradition they've maintained despite busy schedules and geographic separation. The conversation flows easily between updates on their current projects and reflections on how far they've all traveled from that moment in Principal Morrison's office when their lives were forever changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Tyler asks Marcus as they walk through the city afterward. "Everything you went through, all the pain you endured, do you ever wish you'd chosen a different path?" Marcus considers the question seriously, as he considers all questions. Around them, the city pulses with the energy of millions of people making millions of choices, each decision rippling outward in ways they'll never fully understand. "I regret that any of us had to experience that pain," he finally answers. "But I don't regret what we chose to do with it. Pain without purpose is just suffering. Pain with purpose becomes transformation." They pause at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. In the distance, a group of teenagers walks past, their laughter echoing off the buildings. One boy walks slightly apart from the others, his posture defensive, his expression guarded. Without discussion, Tyler approaches the group. "Hey," he says gently to the isolated student. "You okay?" Marcus watches the interaction with the satisfaction of someone who has witnessed the completion of a circle. The boy who once inflicted isolation now recognizes and interrupts it. The victim who once endured alone now ensures others don't have to. The light changes, and they continue walking. Behind them, Tyler continues talking with the group of teenagers, his easy confidence drawing the isolated student into conversation. The ripples continue spreading, person by person, choice by choice, moment by moment. Marcus pulls out his phone and types a text to Agent Hayes. "Informal intervention initiated. Downtown Seattle, 8:47 p.m. Former subject now spontaneously mentoring at-risk youth. Program effectiveness continuing to exceed projections." But as he sends the message, Marcus realizes that what he witnessed wasn't about federal programs or threat assessment. It was about one human being choosing to ease another's loneliness. The quiet kid who endured cruelty has helped create a world where fewer kids have to be quiet, where fewer students have to endure, where more people choose connection over isolation. The greatest victory isn't preventing one tragedy, it's creating a culture where tragedies become less likely with each passing day. As Marcus steps down from the podium after his keynote address, the weight of 5 years settles on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as evidence of distance traveled. The applause fades, but the conversations it sparks will continue long after the conference attendees return to their respective schools, offices, and communities. A middle-aged teacher from rural Montana approaches him, tears in her eyes. "I have a student," she begins, "who reminds me so much of how you described yourself at Lincoln. Quiet, observant, always writing in a notebook. After hearing your story, I'm wondering if I should be seeing strength instead of vulnerability. Marcus hands her his business card. Not the official FBI contact information, but a personal number he reserves for educators who want to learn how to recognize resilience in unexpected forms. Strength often looks like vulnerability from the outside, he tells her. The students who survive by observing, by adapting, by enduring, they're not weak. They're practicing skills that could save lives if we teach them how to channel that strength constructively. This conversation repeats dozens of times throughout the evening. Principals, counselors, law enforcement officers, and parents approach with stories of students who match Marcus's profile. Kids who seem isolated but might actually be intelligent, observant, and capable of extraordinary things if given proper direction and support. Tyler rejoins the group as the reception winds down, his notebook filled with contact information for educators interested in peer mentorship programs. His transformation continues to surprise people who knew him only through federal reports. They expect to meet a reformed criminal, but instead encounter a thoughtful young man whose insights into adolescent psychology rival those of trained professionals. 3 schools in Texas want to pilot the peer intervention model, Tyler reports to the group. And there's a superintendent in Michigan who thinks we could adapt the program for elementary schools, catch the behavioral patterns before they become entrenched. His enthusiasm for the work radiates genuine passion, not the manufactured interest of someone fulfilling community service requirements. Jessica documents their conversation for her latest project, a longitudinal study tracking the lives of students involved in various intervention programs. Her transformation from cruel influencer to social documentarian has given her unique access to stories that traditional journalists might never uncover. The Michigan idea is brilliant, she says, already envisioning how early intervention might reshape childhood development entirely. David, ever the analyst, pulls up statistics on his tablet. Early intervention programs show 300% better success rates than reactive measures, he notes. If we can identify and redirect aggressive patterns in elementary school, we could prevent the kind of escalation that led to... He pauses, still uncomfortable with direct references to Tyler's near radicalization. That led to me almost becoming a monster, Tyler finishes matter-of-factly. His comfort with acknowledging his past has grown over the years, not as self-flagellation, but as recognition that healing requires honesty about harm. As they walk toward their hotel, Marcus reflects on how their individual transformations have created something larger than the sum of their parts. They've become living proof that society's most damaged members can become its most effective healers. That understanding darkness is the first step toward creating light. The next morning brings an unexpected visitor to Marcus's hotel room. Agent Hayes arrives with a file that carries classifications Marcus hasn't seen since his early training. "We have a situation," she begins without preamble, "and we need someone with your specific combination of skills and experience." The file reveals a pattern of concerning behavior at a prestigious private school in Connecticut, not the obvious threats that Tyler's case represented, but subtle signs of psychological manipulation and systematic emotional abuse that traditional surveillance methods can't adequately assess. The perpetrator appears to be not a student, but a teacher, someone whose position of authority makes investigation infinitely more complex. "We need someone who understands how institutional power can be weaponized," Agent Hayes explains. "Someone who can recognize the difference between appropriate discipline and psychological terrorism. Someone who has experience being systematically undermined by a figure of authority." Marcus examines the preliminary reports, his analytical mind immediately recognizing patterns that echo his own experience, but in a more sophisticated form. The teacher in question has left a trail of students with unexplained behavioral changes, increased anxiety, social withdrawal, academic performance decline, but no obvious evidence of inappropriate conduct. You want me to go undercover again, Marcus realizes. But this time as what? I'm too old to be a student. Student teacher, Agent Hayes replies. You'd be completing your education degree while observing classroom dynamics and student behavior. The suspected teacher has specifically requested a student teacher for next semester, someone young enough to relate to students but experienced enough to handle advanced coursework. The mission would require Marcus to return to the role that defined his adolescence, appearing vulnerable while gathering intelligence, enduring potential psychological manipulation, while protecting others from harm. But this time, the stakes feel different. He's no longer a teenager learning to navigate his own trauma while serving others. He's a trained professional with the resources and support necessary to complete the mission without sacrificing his own mental health. There's something else, Agent Hayes adds. We want Tyler to join you, not as an undercover operative, but as a behavioral consultant. His insights into how authority figures can manipulate isolated students might be crucial to understanding this teacher's methods. The proposal represents an evolution in their partnership, from victim and perpetrator to colleagues working together to protect others from experiencing either of their former roles. Marcus considers the implications carefully, weighing the potential benefits against the psychological risks of returning to an environment that might trigger memories of his own systematic abuse. What about Jessica and David? Marcus asks. If we're dealing with institutional manipulation, we'll need someone who understands social media documentation and someone who can identify students being systematically isolated. Agent Hayes smiles. I was hoping you'd suggest that. This case is complex enough that we're assembling a full team. Each of you brings perspectives that traditional agents lack, not just professional training, but personal understanding of how these dynamics actually feel from the inside. As Marcus reviews the case files more thoroughly, he recognizes something that makes his blood run cold. The teacher's methods aren't random acts of cruelty. They're systematic psychological experiments designed to test how much emotional pressure students can endure before breaking. It's not bullying or even traditional abuse. It's something far more calculated and dangerous. Agent Hayes, Marcus says quietly, I think we're dealing with something bigger than one corrupt teacher. These methods, this level of sophistication, it looks like someone is using students as test subjects for psychological manipulation techniques. The room falls silent as the implications sink in. If Marcus is correct, they're not investigating isolated misconduct, but potentially uncovering a research program that treats children as expendable resources in the pursuit of understanding human psychological limits. Then we need to stop it, Agent Hayes says simply. Whatever it takes, whoever is involved, we need to protect these students and make sure this never happens again. Marcus closes the file and looks up at Agent Hayes. When do we start? The quiet kid, who learned to survive institutional cruelty, is about to face his greatest challenge yet, protecting others from the kind of systematic psychological manipulation that could break spirits and destroy lives before students are old enough to understand what's happening to them. 3 weeks into his assignment at Whitmore Academy, Marcus realizes he's encountered something unprecedented in his experience with institutional abuse. Dr. Elizabeth Vance doesn't scream or threaten her students. She doesn't use physical intimidation or obvious psychological warfare. Instead, she employs surgical precision in dismantling her students' sense of self-worth, using academic excellence as both weapon and shield. Marcus observes from his position as student teacher, documenting interactions that would appear innocent to casual observers but form a devastating pattern when analyzed collectively. Dr. Vance praises students publicly while undermining them privately, creates academic challenges designed to generate failure rather than growth, and uses her sterling reputation as protection against scrutiny. She's not breaking them quickly, Marcus reports during his encrypted call with Agent Hayes. She's conditioning them gradually, training them to accept increasingly unreasonable treatment as normal academic rigor. By the time they realize what's happening, they've been psychologically conditioned to blame themselves rather than question her methods. Tyler, working as a behavioral consultant from off-site, analyzes the data Marcus collects with growing concern. This isn't opportunistic abuse, he tells the team during their weekly briefing. This is systematic research. She's testing how much psychological pressure she can apply before students break, then documenting their responses. These kids aren't victims, they're test subjects. Jessica has been monitoring social media and alumni networks, uncovering a pattern that stretches back 15 years. Former students of Dr. Vance show unusually high rates of anxiety disorders, depression, and what appears to be educational trauma, an aversion to academic challenges that persists years after graduation. But they also demonstrate unusual resilience in other areas, as if their forced adaptation to impossible standards has created unexpected strengths. It's like she's accidentally creating a generation of hypervigilant overachievers, Jessica reports. They struggle with traditional academic environments because they expect constant psychological manipulation, but they excel in high-pressure careers that actually require the skills she forced them to develop. David's analysis of the data reveals the most disturbing pattern of all. She's not choosing victims randomly, he explains during their encrypted video conference. She specifically targets students who show early signs of exceptional intelligence combined with social vulnerability, the same profile as potential undercover operatives. It's as if she's reverse engineering the psychological conditioning that creates agents like Marcus. The realization hits the team like a physical blow. Dr. Vance isn't just abusing students, she's studying the psychological mechanisms that create individuals capable of enduring systematic abuse while maintaining their core mission focus. She's essentially trying to recreate the conditions that produced Marcus's psychological resilience, but without the ethical framework and support structure that made his mission meaningful rather than merely traumatic. Marcus feels a chill that has nothing to do with Connecticut's autumn weather. She knows, he tells Agent Hayes during an emergency communication. She knows exactly what kind of operative I am, and she's using my presence here as part of her research. I'm not just investigating her, I'm becoming her latest test subject. The evidence supports his conclusion. Dr. Vance has been subtly increasing the psychological pressure on Marcus himself, testing his responses to professional undermining, social isolation within the faculty, and academic challenges designed to trigger his conditioned responses to systematic abuse. She's studying how trained operatives react to institutional manipulation, gathering data that could be used to identify and neutralize undercover agents in educational settings. We need to extract you immediately, Agent Hayes decides. If she's identified you as an operative, your safety is compromised. But Marcus has already identified 17 students showing signs of severe psychological distress under Dr. Vance's methods. Extracting him now would leave them without protection and potentially subject them to escalated abuse as Dr. Vance attempts to complete her research before losing access to her current test group. I can't leave them, Marcus says firmly. These students are experiencing the same psychological conditioning I endured at Lincoln High, but without any understanding of why or any support structure to help them process it. If I abandon them now, some of them might not survive what she's planning to do next. Tyler's voice comes through the encrypted connection with unusual intensity. Marcus, you don't understand. Based on the patterns Jessica and David have identified, Dr. Vance isn't just studying psychological resilience, she's trying to create a breaking point. She wants to document exactly how much pressure it takes to cause permanent psychological damage in exceptionally intelligent students. If you stay, you're not just risking your own mental health, you're potentially witnessing her attempt to deliberately destroy these kids' minds. The choice Marcus faces is unprecedented in his experience. He can maintain his cover and risk becoming complicit in psychological torture, or he can break cover and potentially save 17 students while compromising the investigation that could prevent Dr. Vance from harming future victims. Agent Hayes gives him 12 hours to decide, but Marcus already knows his answer. The quiet kid who learned to survive systematic abuse is about to make the most dangerous choice of his career, not to gather intelligence or complete a mission, but to step between a predator and her prey, regardless of the consequences to himself or the investigation. Marcus makes his decision at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, sitting in his cramped student housing apartment and staring at psychological profiles of 17 students whose academic brilliance has made them targets for a predator wearing the mask of a mentor. The choice isn't between mission success and personal safety, it's between following protocol and saving lives. He sends 3 encrypted messages before dawn. The first goes to Agent Hayes. Cover blown intentionally. Beginning emergency extraction of all subjects. Request immediate backup for student protection. The second reaches Tyler. Operation Broken Mirror is active. Need behavioral intervention protocols for 17 subjects experiencing acute psychological manipulation. The third message goes to Jessica and David. Documentation phase complete. Moving to protection phase. Prepare for full exposure. At 8:15 a.m., Dr. Elizabeth Vance's advanced psychology seminar receives an unexpected guest speaker. Marcus walks into the classroom not as the deferential student teacher he's pretended to be, but as a federal agent with 5 years of experience in psychological manipulation tactics. The 17 students, brilliant, broken, and desperately confused by months of systematic abuse disguised as academic rigor, look up to see their protector finally removing his mask. "Dr. Vance," Marcus announces, his voice carrying the authority he's hidden for weeks. "You're under federal investigation for psychological abuse, illegal human experimentation, and systematic violation of students' civil rights." He produces his credentials while 17 pairs of eyes widen in recognition and relief. "Students, what you've experienced here isn't education, it's abuse. And it's not your fault." Dr. Vance's composure cracks for the first time in her 15-year career. "You have no authority here," she snaps, but her voice wavers as she realizes the magnitude of her exposure. These are advanced pedagogical techniques designed to prepare exceptional students for psychological torture, Marcus interrupts. "Your advanced techniques include deliberate humiliation, impossible academic standards designed to generate failure, and systematic isolation of students who show signs of independent thinking. That's not education. That's conditioning human beings to accept abuse as normal." Tyler enters through the rear door of the classroom, his presence immediately recognized by students who've heard about the Lincoln High transformation through social media. His reputation as someone who understands both inflicting and recovering from psychological abuse gives his words particular weight. "I used to break people down because it made me feel powerful," Tyler tells the class. "Dr. Vance breaks you down because she thinks it makes you stronger. We're both wrong. Real strength comes from building people up, not tearing them down." Jessica begins streaming live from her phone, documenting the intervention for the millions of followers who've been following the investigation's public components. Her audience watches in real time as federal agents enter the classroom, as students begin to realize they're not failures, but victims, and as Dr. Vance's carefully constructed academic persona collapses under the weight of exposed truth. David works with school counselors to begin immediate psychological triage for the 17 students, his understanding of trauma responses helping identify who needs emergency intervention and who can benefit from peer support. His gentle approach, learned through years of being a follower rather than a leader, proves perfect for students who've been conditioned to distrust authority figures. But the most powerful moment comes when Marcus addresses the students directly, speaking as someone who survived systematic psychological abuse and transformed it into purpose rather than allowing it to become permanent damage. "You are not broken," he tells them, his words carrying the conviction of someone who has walked the same path. "You are not failures. You are not weak for struggling under impossible conditions. Dr. Vance designed this environment to break you, and your survival proves your strength, not your inadequacy. Every day you endured her methods, you were demonstrating resilience that most adults never develop." One student, a 16-year-old prodigy named Sarah Chen, who reminds Marcus painfully of himself at that age, raises her hand tentatively. "How do we know you're not just another test?" she asks, her voice thick with the learned suspicion that comes from months of systematic manipulation. "How do we know this isn't part of her experiment?" Marcus recognizes the question as both reasonable and heartbreaking. Dr. Vance has conditioned these students to distrust even genuine help, to suspect rescue might be another form of abuse. It's the deepest kind of psychological damage, the corruption of hope itself. "You don't have to trust me," Marcus answers honestly. "Trust takes time to rebuild after it's been systematically destroyed. But you can trust your own observations. Watch how Dr. Vance reacts to being exposed. Watch how the other adults in this room treat you. And most importantly, watch how you feel when people speak to you with respect instead of constant criticism." As federal agents escort Dr. Vance from the classroom, she turns back toward her former students one final time. "You have no idea what you're destroying," she tells Marcus. "These students were becoming extraordinary under pressure. Now they'll just be ordinary." Marcus meets her gaze steadily. Ordinary students who feel safe are infinitely more valuable than extraordinary students who are traumatized. We're not destroying anything. We're giving them the chance to discover what they can become when they're built up instead of broken down. The investigation that follows reveals the full scope of Dr. Vance's 15-year experiment in psychological conditioning. Her research, conducted without institutional approval or ethical oversight, has affected 127 students across multiple academic institutions. But it has also, inadvertently, created a generation of individuals with unusual psychological resilience, people who survived systematic abuse and learned to transform trauma into strength. The quiet kid who endured cruelty to protect others has just completed his most important mission, proving that survival isn't enough, that protection matters more than intelligence gathering, and that breaking cover to save lives is sometimes the most courageous choice an operative can make. 6 months after Dr. Vance's arrest, Whitmore Academy has transformed into something its founder never envisioned, a genuine center of learning where intellectual challenge exists without psychological warfare, where academic excellence grows from support rather than fear. The 17 students Marcus protected have become advocates for educational reform, their experiences lending weight to policy changes that will protect future generations of gifted students. Sarah Chen stands at the podium of the congressional hearing on educational abuse, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her audience. "Dr. Vance told us that pressure creates diamonds," she testifies. "But pressure also creates trauma. Real education should challenge your mind, not break your spirit." Her testimony, along with that of 12 other survivors, leads to the passage of federal legislation requiring psychological oversight for all gifted education programs. Marcus watches from the gallery, no longer undercover, but serving as a witness and advocate for educational reform. His role has evolved again, from intelligence gatherer to public voice for institutional change. The quiet kid who absorbed abuse in silence now speaks openly about the difference between challenge and torture, between academic rigor and psychological manipulation. Tyler has established a consulting firm specializing in educational intervention, working with schools to identify and redirect both abusive authority figures and potentially dangerous students before either can cause lasting harm. His unique perspective as someone who has been both perpetrator and victim of systematic abuse makes him invaluable in recognizing warning signs that traditional consultants might miss. The patterns are always the same, Tyler explains to a group of principals during a training seminar. Whether it's a teacher targeting students or students targeting each other, abuse always begins with isolation, escalates through systematic undermining, and culminates in the victim accepting responsibility for their own mistreatment. Change any part of that cycle, and you prevent the abuse entirely. Jessica's documentary series on educational trauma has won 3 Emmy Awards and inspired similar investigations in 17 countries. Her platform has evolved from entertainment to education, showing millions of viewers how to recognize and respond to institutional abuse in all its forms. Her most powerful segment features Dr. Vance herself, interviewed in federal custody, explaining her methodology with chilling clinical detachment. "I believed I was creating resilience," Dr. Vance says in the interview, her words carrying none of the warmth that once charmed students and colleagues. "I thought that students who survived my methods would be stronger for the experience. I never considered that strength gained through trauma isn't the same as strength gained through support." David works directly with the Whitmore survivors, providing ongoing counseling and support as they rebuild their relationship with learning and authority. His gentle approach and understanding of follower psychology helps students who've been conditioned to distrust their own judgment learn to trust themselves again. "Recovery isn't about forgetting what happened," David explains during a group therapy session. "It's about understanding that what happened wasn't your fault, learning to recognize healthy authority from abusive authority, and discovering that real academic challenge feels completely different from psychological manipulation." The ripple effects of the Whitmore investigation extend far beyond one school or even one educational system. Universities across the country have implemented new oversight protocols for faculty-student interactions. The federal government has established an educational abuse reporting system that allows students to report concerning patterns anonymously. Most importantly, the conversation about what constitutes appropriate academic challenge has shifted from accepting suffering as necessary to recognizing that learning should never require psychological damage. Marcus receives letters weekly from students, teachers, and parents who recognize similar patterns in their own educational experiences. His response is always the same: validation that their experiences matter, resources for healing and reporting, and the assurance that speaking up about abuse is never wrong, even when the abuser appears to be acting in the victim's best interest. One letter particularly moves him, from a teacher in rural Ohio who recognized her own abusive methods in Dr. Vance's profile. "I thought I was preparing my students for a harsh world by being harsh with them. After seeing the Whitmore investigation, I realize I was just adding to that harshness instead of giving them strength to resist it. I've changed my entire teaching approach, and my students are both happier and more academically successful. Thank you for showing us that kindness and rigor aren't opposites." The transformation at Whitmore becomes a model for educational reform nationwide. Students who once lived in constant fear of psychological attack now engage in genuine academic discourse. Teachers who once competed to appear most demanding now collaborate to appear most effective. The school's academic performance has improved measurably since prioritizing student psychological safety alongside intellectual challenge. But perhaps the most significant change is less measurable. Students at Whitmore now laugh in hallways, ask questions without fear of ridicule, and approach teachers with curiosity rather than terror. The building itself feels different, lighter somehow, as if the removal of systematic fear has allowed joy back into the learning environment. Marcus walks these hallways occasionally, no longer as an undercover operative, but as a visiting lecturer on educational psychology and trauma-informed teaching. Students approach him with questions, stories, and gratitude that remind him why breaking cover was the right choice, regardless of its impact on the investigation. The quiet kid who learned to survive institutional abuse has helped create a world where future students won't need to develop those survival skills at all. 10 years have passed since Marcus first walked into Lincoln High School as an undercover operative, and today he returns not as an agent, but as a guest speaker for the school's annual Transformation Day, a celebration of second chances and personal growth that has become the most anticipated event of the academic year. The auditorium fills with faces both familiar and new. Tyler sits in the front row, now Dr. Morrison, having completed his PhD in adolescent psychology while maintaining his consulting practice. Beside him, Jessica adjusts her camera equipment, preparing to document the event for her Educational Foundation's archives. David coordinates with school counselors to ensure that students who might be triggered by discussions of abuse have appropriate support available. But the most significant presence belongs to the dozens of former students whose lives intersected with Marcus's mission over the years. Sarah Chen has become a federal prosecutor specializing in educational crimes. Gavin Zhang, the sophomore Tyler identified as potentially at risk 10 years ago, now runs a peer counseling program that has prevented 17 potential tragedies across multiple school districts. The ripple effects continue expanding person by person, choice by choice. Principal Morrison, no relation to Tyler, introduces Marcus with words that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. Our speaker today embodies the principle that our school was built on, that every person has the capacity for transformation, and every act of cruelty can be transformed into an opportunity for greater kindness. Marcus approaches the podium with the measured confidence of someone who has learned to speak truth to power, to choose protection over protocol, and to believe in humanity's capacity for growth, even in its darkest moments. The auditorium falls silent, not from fear, but from genuine anticipation. 10 years ago, Marcus begins, I sat in this very auditorium as a student, listening to speakers tell us about the importance of standing up to bullies, reporting dangerous behavior, and treating each other with kindness. They were right about all of those things, but they missed the most important lesson. Transformation requires understanding, not just consequences. He speaks about the complexity of human behavior, about how hurt people often hurt people, and how healing requires addressing root causes rather than just punishing symptoms. His words carry the weight of experience, someone who has been both victim and protector, target and agent, sufferer and healer. Tyler Morrison taught me that people aren't simply good or evil, they're complex, wounded, and capable of change if given the right support and incentives. Dr. Elizabeth Vance taught me that intelligence without empathy can create monsters, but intelligence combined with compassion can prevent tragedies. Each of you has taught me that young people are far more capable of wisdom, growth, and moral courage than most adults assume. The presentation includes video messages from graduates of the various intervention programs Marcus has helped develop, each sharing how their lives were changed by adults who chose to see potential rather than just problems, who offered second chances instead of just second opinions, and who believed transformation was always possible. But the most powerful moment comes when Marcus invites Tyler to join him on stage. The former bully and former victim stand side by side, no longer defined by their past roles, but by their current purpose. Their friendship, built from mutual understanding of pain and shared commitment to preventing others from experiencing that same pain, represents the possibility of healing that extends beyond individual recovery to societal transformation. The most dangerous phrase in education, Tyler tells the audience, is "that's just how things are." Cruelty isn't inevitable. Abuse isn't character building. Trauma isn't a necessary part of growing up. When adults accept harmful behavior as normal, they create environments where harmful people thrive. When adults demand better, students rise to meet those expectations. Marcus concludes his presentation with a challenge that has become his signature message. You don't have to wait until you're adults to make a difference. Every day, in every interaction, you have the power to choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment, healing over harm. The quiet kid in your class might be gathering intelligence on domestic terrorists, or they might just be hoping someone notices they exist. Either way, they deserve your respect, your protection, and your friendship. After the formal presentation, Marcus mingles with students and staff, answering questions and offering encouragement with the patience of someone who understands that real change happens one conversation at a time. A sophomore approaches him hesitantly, a girl whose defensive posture and careful observations remind him powerfully of himself at that age. "Mr. Marcus," she says quietly, "what if you're the weird kid and you don't know how to not be weird?" Marcus kneels to her eye level, recognizing the question as one he once desperately wanted to ask, but never had the courage to voice. "Being different isn't the same as being weird," he tells her gently. "And even if you are weird, that's not something that needs to be fixed. Some of the most important people in the world are weird. The question isn't how to stop being different, it's how to find people who appreciate your particular kind of different." As the day winds down and the last students filter out of the auditorium, Marcus, Tyler, Jessica, and David gather in their old cafeteria for a quiet moment of reflection. The table where Marcus once sat alone is now occupied by a diverse group of students engaged in animated conversation about a science project. The corner where Tyler once held court has been transformed into a reading nook where introverted students can eat lunch without feeling isolated. "Do you think we actually changed anything?" Jessica asks, her documentarian's eye still capturing small moments of connection and kindness throughout the cafeteria. David, ever the analyst, pulls up statistics on his tablet. Bullying incidents at Lincoln High have decreased by 73% over the past decade. Academic performance is up, mental health referrals are down, and student satisfaction surveys show record high levels of feeling safe and supported. Statistically speaking, yes, we changed everything. Tyler adds his own observation, but more importantly, we changed the culture. Students here expect kindness now. They report concerning behavior because they've been taught that protection is everyone's responsibility. They include isolated classmates because they've learned that everyone has value. The numbers matter, but the attitude shift matters more. Marcus looks around the cafeteria that once felt like a battlefield and now feels like a community. The physical space hasn't changed much, but the emotional atmosphere has transformed completely. Students move through their lunch period with the easy confidence of people who know they belong, who trust that they'll be treated with respect, and who understand their responsibility to extend that same respect to others. "We proved that transformation is possible," Marcus says finally. "Not just individual transformation, but systemic transformation. We proved that schools can be places where students thrive instead of just survive, where differences are celebrated instead of punished, and where everyone, the bullies, the victims, and the bystanders, can choose to become better versions of themselves." As they prepare to leave, Marcus takes one last look at the school that shaped him, broke him, and ultimately taught him that surviving cruelty isn't enough. The real victory comes from transforming that survival into protection for others. The quiet kid who learned to endure has become the voice that ensures others won't have to. Sometimes the greatest stories aren't about heroes defeating villains. They're about ordinary people choosing to become extraordinary through their response to adversity. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. And sometimes the most powerful lesson we can learn is that the person we dismiss, ignore, or mistreat today might be the very person capable of saving our lives tomorrow. The next time you encounter someone who seems different, isolated, or struggling, remember Marcus Chen. Remember that quiet observers often see more than loud speakers, that survival skills can be transformed into protection skills, and that everyone, absolutely everyone, has the capacity to become better than their worst moment. If this story touched you, share in the comments what moment moved you most. And send this video to someone who needs to hear that transformation is always possible, that second chances can lead to extraordinary outcomes, and that the quiet kids often have the loudest impact on the world.